Hey everyone, welcome back to One Earth Mushrooms. Today I'm going to be showing you how to transfer spore prints onto an agar plate and then how to transfer mycelium from a healthy agar plate into a liquid culture jar. By the end of this video, you'll be able to create healthy cultures that thrive and benefit your grow for years to come. You may be curious about why I choose to do these extra steps of putting spores onto agar plates and utilizing liquid culture to inoculate my grain jars, when in theory and in practice, you could just utilize spore syringes and directly inoculate your grain jars with spores. Utilizing agar plates and liquid culture provides many benefits, one of which is reducing chances of contamination. When you have the chance to put spores onto an agar plate, you get to see the health of the mycelium, if there's any contamination, before you inoculate a big batch of grain jars. So one of the big benefits of this process is reducing contamination. So if you've been struggling with contamination and using spore syringes directly in your grain jars as your inoculation source or your inoculant, then this could be a great tech for you to try to potentially reduce your chances of contamination. Another big benefit of creating liquid culture, harvesting your own spores, is pushing and cultivating your own genetics. So if you grow a batch of mushrooms that you really like, rather than buying more spores from wherever you got them, you can actually harvest your own spores, as I showed you in my last video, and then utilize these spores to produce another batch of mushrooms that are very similar to the batch that you were satisfied with. So this is a great way to keep your process in-house and reduce the cost of your grow. One final benefit to utilizing liquid culture is that you're able to create larger amounts of culture with a small amount of spores. So if you're using a spore syringe to inoculate your grain jars, one spore syringe will only get you maximum of 10 grain jars, assuming that it's a spore syringe that's about 10 cc's large. Whereas if you're collecting your own spores and creating liquid culture, one jar of liquid culture, which I'll show you how to make in this video, will come from 1 cc of spores, so a very small amount of spores, and you can inoculate hundreds of jars. So with the same amount of spores that you would use from a spore syringe, that would only give you 10 jars. Utilizing this process of agar and liquid culture, you can create hundreds of jars. So there are many benefits to this practice. In this video, I'm going to walk you through every step. So by the end, you'll know exactly what to do. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Here's what you're going to need. You are going to need some rubbing alcohol to spray your hands with and keep all surfaces clean, a roll of paper towels, a still air box, a collection of spores on a spore print from any mushroom of your choice. You'll also need agar plates, an inoculation loop that is attached to a rod, I'll link this in the description, a lighter for sterilizing things, gloves to keep your hands clean, a mask, and then you'll also need some tape for labeling, a Sharpie to write things down, and then for part 2 of this exercise, you'll need colonized agar plates and liquid culture jars. Today I'm showing up to my inoculation station in a very clean outfit with clothes that are fresh out of the washer dryer. My hair is clean and out of my face, and now I'm going to begin doing a final clean of myself and my space. So the first thing I want to do is clean myself. So I have this bottle of rubbing alcohol here in a spray bottle, and I'm not going to be shy. I'm going to, actually, I'm just noticing I have some jewelry on, so I'm going to remove that. I'm also going to use this hair tie to just pull my hair into a low pony so it's out of the way. And now I can take this bottle of rubbing alcohol, give my hands a really good spray, not being shy at all. Spray them down, give them a good wipe. And I'm going to put some gloves on. So these are the gloves I'm working with today. I'm going to put these on. Great, we have nice clean hands underneath these gloves. I'm going to go ahead and put a mask on as well. The mask is important to wear because every time you breathe out, you're breathing out spores and bacteria and all kinds of things from the inside of your body. So we want to protect the things that we're working with from all of the things and spores and whatnot that we're exhaling. So now we have a cleaner body. We're going to begin to clean our space. So I'll give my hands another little spray. I'll spray the table, getting in there nice and deep, just making sure it's really well sprayed down. And I'll give this an initial wipe down. Once my initial wipe down is complete, I'm going to repeat that process, wipe the table down again, and give it another spray. Great, now we've sprayed and wiped the table down twice, and I'm going to give it one final spray. And now we are working with a very clean surface here. I'll give my hands another spray. Just feeling really good and clean using a lot of rubbing alcohol. The next step of this process is to prepare our still air box. To clean my still air box, I'm going to begin with the lid. Now, we have a clean surface here, so we're going to want to try and keep it as clean as possible. So before I set the lid onto the table, I'm going to spray the surface down. By the way, you may notice that there's a hole in the lid of my still air box. Your lid should not have a hole. Of course, this hole is here so that I can videotape this process for you and put a camera right there. So I'll set the sprayed side down, and then I'll spray the other side of the lid, and I'll go ahead and fast forward through this process, but basically I'm just going to wipe down both sides of the lid. Okay, now my lid has been fully sprayed and wiped down on both sides. Just for good measure, I'm going to go ahead and give it another spray so that the rubbing alcohol can just sit on the lid. And if any spores or anything decides to land on this lid, the rubbing alcohol that's sitting on the surface will prevent that spore or bacteria from surviving. Now that the lid is clean, I'm going to move on to cleaning the actual box. And you'll notice, like right there, almost instinctively, I'm continuing to spray my hands with rubbing alcohol just continuously throughout this process to make sure my hands stay clean. So I'm bringing this still air box over. By the way, you'll also notice something interesting about my still air box is that there are bits of black paint on the bottom, so not to worry, that isn't anything dirty, it's just old paint from an old project that I was doing with this box, so just ignore that. I'm going to go ahead and spray down this box, starting with the outside, really making sure I spray the bottom well so that I can place the still air box on top of this table, this clean table that I have. And then I'll go ahead and give the inside a good spray down with rubbing alcohol. So this is all a pretty straightforward process, right? We're just spraying things down with rubbing alcohol and then wiping them down to spread the rubbing alcohol into all the nooks and crannies. That is an important note too. When I'm wiping the surfaces down of whatever material I'm cleaning, my goal is not to remove the rubbing alcohol, but actually to spread it around. So I'll go ahead and give this a wipe down now as well. Okay, I've completed my first spray and wipe down of my still air box. Before I keep moving with cleaning this box, I also just wanted to mention a few things that might look a little different about my still air box. As you can probably tell, in the past, I have used this box for actually growing mushrooms. So I've just placed some tape over those holes to seal the box back up. You'll also notice that there's a huge hole here. This is the way that I like to do it to be able to fit my hands in there. Some people would prefer to have 2 holes here that they would stick their arms through. I like this method of one big hole so that I can move my hand around. I haven't found that it's given me any issues with contamination, but your still air box may look different. It might have just 2 holes, and that's totally fine. There are many ways to build a still air box, and this is just a way that's worked for me. So do it in the way that makes you feel best. I'm gonna go ahead and give this one more spray and wipe down. You can't be too clean, so just like we sprayed the table surface down multiple times, I'm gonna do that with this box as well. I'm gonna clean it multiple times. So here's round 2 of that. Okay, so now I have cleaned this box thoroughly. I'm going to go ahead and take this lid, and before I place the lid on the box, I'm just gonna give it one final spray. We really can't use too much rubbing alcohol, so I'm just gonna give everything one more spray, place the lid on top, and secure the box. So now we have a clean still air box, and we're gonna load this up with the materials that we need to transfer our spores onto an agar plate. So the first thing, of course, that we're going to need is our spores. Here I have some spores that I collected about 2 weeks ago, so these are really fresh. But you can use spores that are really old. I've heard some people say that spores are practically immortal, and others say they last, as little as 6 months, but always worth a shot. If you have some spores laying around that you want to test and just see if they're still viable, then this is a great way to do it. So these are obviously going to work great. They're really fresh. I'm going to spray the container down. The inside of the container, I'm sure, is already clean, but I'm going to open this up. Nope. Beautiful. And I'm going to take my little spore package out. And I'm just going to lightly spray the outside with rubbing alcohol. I don't want to kill the spores that are inside, so I'm not going to go overboard. But just so that the surface of this container is clean, I gave it a light spray with rubbing alcohol. And then I put it inside the still air box. I'll put this container to the side. And then the next thing I'm going to clean is my agar plates themselves. So here I have some agar plates that I ordered online. Rather than wipe these down, I'm just going to give them such a large amount of rubbing alcohol, such a big spray, that they are literally coated. And I'm making sure to keep the lid tight, so none of the rubbing alcohol is getting into the plate. Once I've sprayed it thoroughly, I'll place it inside the box, and I'll repeat this process with the second plate. You can do as many plates as you want. Sometimes I'll do 10 plates with just one spore print. Each spore print contains, millions and millions of spores, so don't hold back. Use as many agar plates as you want. Today I'm just doing 2. The last thing that I need to clean and put into this still air box is my little inoculation loop, so I'll grab that now. I'll give this a spray. Again, giving it such a large spray of alcohol that every surface is coated and dripping. And then I'll place this inside the still air box as well. Beautiful. Now, just for good measure, I'm going to spray the inside of my box with rubbing alcohol. And then I'm going to move you guys over here and switch to a voiceover and walk you through each step of what I do next to complete the process of putting spore prints onto agar. Okay, so perhaps I'll just continue speaking instead of doing a voiceover. Here we are inside the still air box. You can see there's some black specks down here, but that again is just paint, so nothing to be worried about. Gonna give everything a good spray with rubbing alcohol. I'm gonna spray my hands again. And then I'll put my hands nice and clean. Oh no, I ripped my glove, you can see, so I'm gonna have to replace my glove. I'll do that real quick. Okay, so here we are. We're inside of a beautiful still air box. We have both of our agar plates, our inoculation loop, and our spores. This is all that we need, except one other thing actually we will need is a little lighter to flame sterilize this inoculation loop. But I'll do that in a moment. First, I want to make sure I have, all my supplies here. And then I'm going to pick up my little spore pack, and I'm going to unwrap it. so that it's ready to go. Because as soon as I flame sterilize this, I want to move quickly to reduce chances of contamination. I'm going to open this up and you can see we have some beautiful spore prints here. They're just stunning. So I'll put these here. We don't want them to remain exposed to the air for too long, but we are in a still air box, so it's all right to leave them out. And now I'm going to flame sterilize this loop. So I'll take it out of this box, which is covered in rubbing alcohol, and I don't want to introduce, obviously, fire into this box. It's a major fire hazard. So I'll briefly take it out, flame sterilize it, and bring it back in. Okay, so now we've flame sterilized this inoculation loop. You could see that it was bright orange, and that's how we know it's sterile. And I'm going to move over to my agar plate, take the lid off, and now is when we want to move kind of quickly to reduce chances of contamination. So I'll open this up, and I'm just going to scrape a few little black specks, and that's it. That's all we have to do. I saw a few black specks fall onto the plate. I'm going to put a cap on it, and that's it. Our first plate has been inoculated. I'll show you, whoops, getting a little carried away here. I'll show you guys how this looks. See those little black specks on the plate right there? That is exactly what you're looking for. You only need like the tiniest little speck, because if you can see the speck of spores, that means there's like thousands of spores in that little teeny tiny speck. Pretty magical. So I'm going to repeat that on the second plate. Before I do that, I'm going to flame sterilize this loop, so I'll do that real quick. So you can see, you saw that orange color for a moment there. I'll do the same thing, so I'll take my little plate, open it up, and quickly, to reduce chances of contamination, scrape some spores on there. And that's it. I'll quickly put the lid back on, not touching the agar surface at all. And then we're done. I'll go ahead and fold these spore prints back up, and look, there's so many spores there. We can continue to use these same spore prints for a really long time. They'll last us a really long time. So I'll get these all folded up gently, and then I'll put them back in their container in a moment, but I'll show you guys. There's my little speck that I'm looking for. It looks like we got a couple around here. So this is beautiful. I'm going to take these out and label them, and then we'll carry on to the next step. Okay, so with this plate that I've just put my spores onto, I'm going to gently rub the top off of any excess rubbing alcohol so that I can write on the surface of the lid with a Sharpie. I'm going to put today's date, I'll put the name of the strain, and I'll be done labeling it. So you can label it however you want, but I just highly recommend labeling your little plate. After you've labeled it, you can place this in a dark and somewhat warm environment. I guess I can take my mask off. You want to store these plates in somewhere like a cabinet that's warm and dark. So I'll show you where I store mine. So I like to store mine in the kitchen here. I'll just place this up here and put it in the corner. And then when I close this cabinet, they'll be nice and dark and warm. And that's that. All right, friends, we're on a roll here. Now that we've placed our spores onto agar, I'm going to show you what your plate looks like when it's healthy and ready to be put onto or into a liquid culture jar. Here, very proudly, is my healthy spore plate. I'll give you guys a close-up of this now. Okay, here is my healthy spore plate. As you can see, the spores that I placed in the middle, which I put actually a big clump, so you can see they're kind of clumped up, are beautiful. They're just developing this white patch of mycelium. There's nothing else. Let's see if I can get this to focus. There we go. Nothing else growing, just two beautiful patches of mycelium from these two beautiful clumps of spores that I put on here. This is an example of a clean plate, and now I'm going to show you an example of a plate that is contaminated. But before I do, I'll actually just mention these are 2 weeks. This plate is 2 weeks old. So I go ahead and I'll put it in my liquid culture at this point. Some people like to wait a little longer, but in my opinion, this is a perfect time to put it into liquid culture. We don't want to wait too much longer because as the mycelium develops towards the end of the plate, sometimes you'll start to see contamination. So better to grab it now while it's still nice and clean. And really, you don't need much mycelium. This is all the mycelium you need. So if you're ready to move it into liquid culture, you might as well go for it, because you don't need much mycelium to get things started. Now, as I said, this is an example of a clean plate. Here's an example of a contaminated plate. This is an example of a contaminated plate. As you can see, let's see if I can get this angle. As you can see, we have the healthy spores in the middle. It'll focus, but on the edges, you'll notice, like on the edge corner there, I'll put a little something pointing to it. That is a big clump of green mold. You can also look at it from the back, and you can see that the mold on the edge has this yellow tinge that is quite unsightly. So this is contaminated, and we're going to put this directly into the trash and move forward with our clean plate over there. Okay, so we're just going to pick up where we left off here in our inoculation station. I already have my gloves on. I'm going to put my mask back on. And I'll go ahead and clear anything out of my way that doesn't belong here. So the Sharpie can go away. Let's see, this glove that ripped can go away. This lighter will stay, actually. We'll use this lighter. And then I'll give my hands a quick spray. And I'll take anything out of this inoculation box or whatever still air box that we don't need. So I'm done with this little spore print. I'll put this to the side. And I'll leave my inoculation, well, I'll just take this out, actually. I'm going to give my still air box a quick spray down. So I'll open the lid. I'm just going to give her another gentle spray. It's still clean in there. We just inoculated in there, so it's a nice clean box, but an extra little spray can't hurt. Once that's complete, we'll start loading this box up with what we need to inoculate our liquid culture jars. So, of course, naturally, the first thing that we'll need is our liquid culture jars themselves. Today I'm going to do 2 jars, so I'll remove the foil from the top. If you're curious as to how I made these jars, we have a step-by-step process on our channel that I will link to right above me here, so you can see how to make your own liquid culture jars. Philly Golden Teacher also has a great recipe. So I'll give this a spray. I'm going to thoroughly spray the jar, so extremely thoroughly. And then I'll give it a wipe down with a paper towel to spread the rubbing alcohol all over the jar. I'll wipe down the top of the jar and the lid, the inoculation port, the air filter, and then I'll place this jar inside of my still air box. I'm actually going to crack the lid to do that. Put it in. And then I'm going to repeat that process with the second jar now. Okay, I've sealed the box. Both of my jars are in there. And now I'm going to move on to putting my colonized agar plate into the box. So I'll do the same thing. I'll give this a good wipe down, spray and wipe down, so that it's nice and clean. Previously, and you could choose to do this too, I put some tape onto my agar plate to keep the lid sealed tight. So I'm just going to remove that tape as well right now. Okay, I'll put that inside the air box now that it's been thoroughly sprayed, wiped, and the tape has been removed. Before we move forward, my little rubbing alcohol bottle is running low, so I'm going to refill this really quick. Okay, this should be enough to get us through the rest of our inoculation. Okay, now I'm going to clean my inoculation loop. So I'll give this a really good spray. All right, so it's fully coated in rubbing alcohol. And then I'll just give this a quick wipe down. And then I will spray it again. Beautiful. I'll put that in the box. And now we are ready to get started with inoculating. I'll keep my lighter to the side here so that I can flame sterilize my inoculation loop when it's time. But in the meantime, I'm going to move you guys over as you were onto the top of the still air box so you can see an overhead view of how I inoculate my liquid culture jars. Okay friends, you are now inside my still air box. Welcome. I'm going to give my hands a spray with rubbing alcohol. And then I'm going to bring in also a paper towel that has been thoroughly, and I mean thoroughly, sprayed with rubbing alcohol. I'll even do that in the box so you can see. I'm giving it a very thorough spray. Rubbing alcohol. So this is going to be kind of like a sani wipe for us, and I'll fold it down into a little square. So here I have my very clean sheet of paper towel. All right, so I'm going to move things around here a little bit. And I'll begin by taking my little jar of liquid culture and loosening the lid a little bit. So I'm just going to gently loosen that lid, right? So that I can lift it off as soon as I'm ready. I'll go ahead and do that on both of the jars. I'm not taking the lid off, but as you can see, it kind of is a little tight. So I'm just going to give myself a moment to loosen it. Perfect. So that they're very easily removable when it's time. Now that we've done that, I'm going to take my little inoculation loop, and just like we did last time, I'm going to take it out of the box and flame sterilize it, and then bring it back in and immediately begin taking the mycelium from the agar plate and putting it into these liquid culture jars. So here we go, I'm going to flame sterilize this. All right, we got a glowing orange inoculation loop. Holding positive intentions in my mind and in my heart, I will pick up my little agar plate here. Actually, I'm first going to remove the lid here, and moving very quickly, I'll remove the lid of the agar plate, and then I will take this inoculation loop and begin to scrape a little mycelium off of this agar plate. We can include the agar, that's totally fine, and we'll just drop that into the jar. Close her up. We could go ahead and move on to the other jar, but just for safe measure, I am going to re-flame sterilize my inoculation loop. So I'll put the cap back on here. I'll move this over, and then I'm going to give this a quick wipe down, this loop. And then I'm going to flame sterilize, straighten that out a bit. I'm going to flame sterilize this loop again, so I'll do that now. Voila, we got a clean loop. Some people, by the way, I'll go ahead and talk while I work here, prefer to choose mycelium from the end, from the end of the print, so closer to this area. Some prefer to take it from this area. Because they are mixed philosophies, I like to just take it from the middle. But whatever floats your boat, you can do some reading and see what feels right for you. Maybe this time I'll actually take a little bit from closer to the spore area. And I'll put that directly into my jar, put a cap on my prints, or excuse me, my agar plate, reseal the jar very quickly. The jar shouldn't be open for more than a couple seconds. We want to reduce that as much as possible. And then I will very tightly seal this jar. And then we've done it. We have inoculated 2 beautiful jars of liquid culture. Great job, friends. Let me show you what's next. Okay, friends, we've done it. We've inoculated our 2 liquid culture jars. We can now be complete with our sanitary conditions. You can take off your mask and your gloves, and we're going to take these jars over to our magnetic stir plate and give them a really good stir. I'll show you guys what that looks like right now. Okay friends, welcome to my magnetic stir plate. I'm going to give this a wipe down with rubbing alcohol, and then I'll place my freshly inoculated jar onto the plate and slowly turn this on, and you'll see that little piece of agar is going to get broken up and spun around the jar so beautifully. I'll let this stir for about 30 seconds and then I will